It was noontime today in the center of Beijing when a man walked in the middle of the Avenue of Eternal Peace.
Hello, Rye. Welcome back to the Survival and Basic Badass Podcast, Kevin and Chuck. Today, well, we're going to talk about war strategy. One of the things, understanding tactics and how the game is played has been a big thing and will kind of help people in life in general. Like, you know how they have that Sun Tzu art of war and all these different things. Um, they'll have Sun Tzu in the art of business and how to,
Right.
because strategies and tactics kind of carry to many parts of life. And then it turns out as preppers, we kind of think that it's very possible that in life you may end up having to kind of defend your property, defend your something against small groups of gangs or maybe a corrupt government. Who knows what you're preparing for? We have an audience in a bunch of different countries and things don't always go the way that you expect them to. Um, and understanding tactics and war strategy, plus, I got to be honest, war strategy is just pretty cool. Now, Kevin is a big fan of war strategy and war history, and kind of devotes a lot of his free time into studying different tactics. The military has the war colleges, and at West Point, the Navy has the war college, and in West Point they study previous wars and kind of know your history. Really can shape your future, right? And
Mhm.
understanding how the game is played. And I gotta say, more and more we're seeing lots of games being played. So I think it has a great purpose to understand that kind of stuff. Um, so I kind of broke it down into different types of warfare strategy, and I just kind of wanted to jump right in and see where we go here. So one of the big things is kind of divide and conquer, and the way I imagine that is having like one group turn on itself where forces are divided within. And that
Mhm.
you might look at it like in America, how we have the Republicans and the Democrats just kind of hate each other, right? So if the
Right.
government was trying to control people, it might be smart to have people hating each other instead of hating the government.
Mhm.
Now, they maybe give us quite a few reasons to hate the government as a whole, but if we're so focused on hating each other, it's kind of hard to do. But this has been done throughout history, where people are divided amongst themselves before you kind of do it. You have an example of that, Kevin?
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of that, a lot of that type of strategy is used when smaller forces are attacking larger ones. You know what I mean? If you're outnumbered, you have to divide your enemy's forces up. So that you can take bite-sized pieces out.
Yeah.
Um, and historically, that's been done throughout Asia for you know
Yes.
millennia, not even centuries, but back to 2000 BC,
Yeah,
3000
no, I
BC.
think I think I read, one of the big examples was the Middle Assyrian Empire.
Mhm.
And they basically subjugated Syria, Palestine, Armenia, Mesopotamia, but basically they turned them all kind of against each other. And that
Mhm.
was, they're big. And then once they kind of cut it up into bite-sized pieces, like you're saying, then it was easier to kind of tackle on your own the
Mhm.
individuals.
Right, right. And the British does historically did that with colonization. It wasn't necessarily a military tactic, but they would take the smaller groups in an area and put them in charge of, the larger populations and have them hate each other, because of racism or, whatever religious beliefs, whatever it is, you take the smaller group and back them to
right?
subdue the larger groups.
Oh, even taking it back to Nazi Germany, right?
Hmm.
Remember they talked, you always hear the story of, well, they came for the communists first, and
Right.
then each group, and then they came for the Jews, and when they came for the Christians, there was nobody left to stand for me or whatever
Right.
it is, right? But
Hmm.
that's the idea is, well, that's not me, you're harassing them, so that's okay. Or you have me hating them and therefore, I mean,
Yeah, I hated those people.
there you
Yep, and the gypsies and the whole
the
the whole
gypsies.
things.
Exactly, Kevin.
Yeah.
That's the thing, you always have to, but Kevin always fancies the gypsy women, so, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. All right. I mean, I don't know. Another one you want to jump into on that or
No,
keep moving?
let's keep moving.
All right. Total war. Now, total war is where a nation mobilizes its entire resources and typically like civilians and everybody, and you're just all in.
Yeah,
Kind of the burn the ships attitude. You've
yeah,
heard the story of where, they roll in to conquer somewhere and they burn their own ships. So that way everybody knows, hey, there's no retreat. We're all in,
right.
right? That's the kind of commitment that total war is.
Yeah.
And that's
Now,
Germany in World War II, right? I mean, they
right,
were
right.
all in.
Yeah, I think that originally one of the first things where you can really apply that when the first military conflicts was the Napoleonic Wars.
Mhm.
Um, basically everybody in France was working towards the war effort. Everybody was producing food for the war effort, producing uniforms for the war effort. Everybody that wasn't fighting in the military was, you know, was working towards the goals of the military.
Right,
And, Napoleon famously said, I can spend, you know, a 30,000 soldiers a month because he had so many just every fit male was moving up and
right.
joining the military. And that works as long as you can keep conquering things and taking the resources.
Yes.
But it doesn't work when you're losing. When you're losing war, then it doesn't work anymore.
If you keep giving up resources,
Yeah.
having everybody in. But that's I mean, in America in World War II, I mean, we switched all our factories, Ford was making planes and all
Right.
these different things. They
Right.
were
And
making
by
guns and yeah,
mhm,
in our industrial factories, everything was retooled for ammo for, you know.
yeah, by the First World War, uh, basically every country was functioning in that way. And it
Uh-huh.
was effective for Napoleon, and Napoleon had conquered most of Europe previously, so they understood that this was a valuable tactic to use.
And I think even Genghis Khan, you look at it, that was kind of his mindset. He actually applies a lot of these techniques throughout. But the Khans, they moved. Everybody was a warrior. There was
Right.
nobody. That whole clan just moved in, destroying. Very much like Napoleon.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, no, I like it. Total War. I had one or two other examples I wanted to hit on. That Sherman's March to the Sea in the Civil War. That
Yeah,
was
people really. I mean, there's a lot of hate for Tecumseh Sherman,
yes,
William
yes,
Tecumseh Sherman. A lot of hate for him in the South, especially.
yes.
Um, but he was somebody that had an interesting mindset when it came to war. His idea was that war is hell, and the
And he
worse you make it, the
right.
shorter it is.
And that's it. And that, he's kind of like the father of psychological warfare. He went in and destroyed everything.
Yeah,
He was brutal. But those are the kind of things that, going in and annihilating is
yeah,
how you
yeah,
win,
and he
how you
didn't
end it quickly.
uh after they captured Atlanta. It was really there wasn't really much of a southern military force left between them and the sea.
Yeah.
And it was basically the same thing. He destroyed everything as he went past. Took all the resources they needed, destroyed the railroad tracks behind his train so that nobody could use them again. It was just
Yeah.
advancing, 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 and leaving nothing but destruction behind you. All the plantations were burned. Everybody is basically homeless now and had to figure out how they were gonna not freeze to death and not starve to death
Right.
on their own.
All of
Like,
a sudden
that's your
you're
goal now. You
right.
can't fight, you know?
And that's it. And you can't support other people fighting. You have nothing left to um the Blitzkrieg, kind of the same thing. The
Mhm,
German Blitzkrieg, or they called it the Lightning War, right? During World War II, it it was just all in. And that's why I think of that as total war. I mean, they just hit from every front. And
mhm,
that's kind of a different shape on it as opposed to just incorporating your whole country, although the Germans did do that,
mhm,
but they just devastated from a multi-pronged attack. When I think of warfare, I get excited about the multi-prong attack. I feel like, obviously, if you're China and you have a billion bodies and you're fighting a country with, a million bodies lining up against each other and just rolling over them, China, that sounds pretty smart.
mhm,
But when you're fighting a bigger adversary, it's nice to be able to break into a million separate attacks, and that's what the Blitzkrieg was,
mhm,
where everything's kind of different, kind of independent of its own people. I mean, it's nice if you can coordinate to frustrate people at the same time, but having separate plans and hitting things different way, that's pretty awesome.
mhm,
It really it's a way to, like, overwhelm a bigger force. I mean, that's honestly what Al Qaeda did with the United States military is, I mean, obviously we're going to talk about guerrilla warfare, and that's what Al Qaeda did is guerrilla warfare. But the fact that they were just hitting on so many different fronts, it made it impossible to, kind of have a big army just roll in and yeah, I got you. Next, I have shock and awe. Now, obviously, we think of like Desert Storm when we think shock and awe, right? That's
right.
the most
They
recent.
used that phrase over and over again during the first, few weeks of that war. And, it was an effective thing. It was basically, a bombing campaign. And,
Yeah,
the air defense systems were the first that were taken out, and then after that, it was just a free for all. Tomahawk missiles incoming from ships, um, bombing from, B-52s and stealth fighters, and, you know, the United States has a million different types of bombing aircraft. They took out uh, uh, a lot of the generals, a lot of the higher paid staff, a lot of the brass. They took out them, and that basically meant that they couldn't coordinate attacks in return as
right,
the American troops advanced.
right. One of the other big things was we we flew a bunch of stuff through there, like things like I heard like wooden planes and stuff. Like we launched up little nonsense things, but basically got people to turn on their radars all
Hmm.
throughout, and then we could see where they are. Because obviously radars transmit signals.
Right.
When you see the signals, you're like, "Oh, that's what's going on here." And we went in and were able to bomb them. Another thing we did was we threw basically think of like metal mesh nets over power and communication lines, which ended up destroying lines, throughout. So they weren't able to warn people of what's coming ahead, you know?
Right.
And that
Right.
that made it a big thing, like, "Hey, don't turn on your shit because 'cause they're just gonna bomb you, and you're gonna be in bigger trouble."
Yeah.
And that was really what happened, and they were able to roll through, and that's,
Yeah. I
I
had a friend of mine that was a communication specialist during for the army
mhm,
during Desert Storm, and he had an interesting story. He said their specialty was disrupting high tech communications, and the Iraqis didn't have any high tech communications, so they basically stuck him on a machine gun and a helicopter. And he said
that sounds like the same job.
they said they were flying at night and they're getting fired at. And so he, started firing back. And the pilot's like, "What the fuck are you doing?" He said, "Well, they're shooting at us." He goes, "Yeah, but they don't know where we are until they saw you shooting back." He said, "They're just shooting into the air. Now they're shooting at us."
Nice. See, it turns out you gotta be trained for the job that you do.
Right. Yeah.
Who knew, right? Yeah, no, I get it. I would be that guy shooting back, but that also makes sense, You're like,
Hmm.
"Oh, wait, let me think about this, think this through." That's always one of the things is, you have to understand the game, and simple mistakes can get people killed. That's how it goes. Um, Another big shock and awe tactic would be Pearl Harbor, right? Did that
Right.
not overwhelm? Yeah, that kind of backfired on the way they thought that would play out.
Long term, it did. Yeah.
They were like, "Oh, well, what'll really shut them up is if we just destroy a whole state in one shot and the
Right.
Pacific Fleet, right? We're gonna just knock them out." And but yeah, it turns out you have to know your enemy, and when you do, you understand that just pissing us off is probably not the way to go.
Yeah. I
Somehow
mean, it didn't
Americans
work
have a
out
lot of
for.
fight in their heart. Yeah,
Yeah. It didn't work out for Osama bin Laden when he, during the 9/11 attacks. That you know, didn't really like shut us up and get us out of their area. Didn't work out for a lot of those people that do those types of
right.
things with the United States. And honestly, I don't know if that kind of tactic works for anybody. Unless you really destroy, a
Yeah.
large portion of the military right off the bat.
Well, you know where it did work one time? Can I bring up Hiroshima and Nagasaki?
Hmm.
That's where, like you said, well, if you're really devastating, turns out that was really devastating.
Hmm.
Um, they shut it down, and that's a war ender. But obviously, look at the consequence. I mean, it was severe and dramatic, and it. But I heard Truman say in an interview, he talked about it. He's the one who actually made the decision to drop the bomb, and he said that he was debating about it, and he was told, well, it'll kill 10,000 people, and he said, we were losing 10,000 people a day
Hmm.
in the war, and he's like, that's a no brainer to kill 10,000 of the enemy kind of thing versus our 10,000. And I don't think he said it was a no brainer because
Right.
but he
He
said that
debated
the
on it for a
numbers,
long time.
yeah, he really did hesitate on it, but that was one of the things. Another tactic with shock and awe, and this would be more like a strategy. Um, the I way back they used to they called them war pigs, and what they would do is they would cover these pigs with tar and set them on fire and send them into the enemy when they're fighting a big force, and talk about causing chaos and confusion.
Hmm.
That's nothing like an angry flaming pig coming at you, and it
Yeah.
smells like bacon, so
Yeah. No,
nothing's
and
good.
I know that probably some of us have a familiarity with pigs, and the 200-pound, 300-pound pigs, but they get big, man. And when
Yeah,
they come charging, you don't want to be in their way. I
no.
had a I was living on a farm a few years ago, and a 500 pound pig got loose,
Oh,
and I was sitting on my front porch, and I saw him running up the driveway, and I was like, "Nah, nah." We ran into, me and my son. I got my little son inside, and he just came across that porch and destroyed everything. Just smashed up the tables and the chairs, and everything was knocked all over the place. Turns out the only way to get a pig to do what you want is food. They're food
food.
driven. You know what I mean? So the guy next door, he came over with a box of cereal and just started throwing handfuls of cereal out on the road and drew the pig back to his pen. But
That's
I
the
mean,
trick.
those are big animals you don't want to mess with, especially when they're pissed off.
No, exactly. All right. Next, I would kind of jump into guerrilla warfare.
Hmm.
And like I touched on earlier, that's kind of the whole, well, Vietnam was that, right? With kind of almost both sides to be
Hmm.
honest. Like, we didn't go with that approach in our mind, but when we got there, I think we really changed our strategy and how we did it. But definitely the Vietnamese coming after us. I
Hmm.
mean, there's nothing more guerrilla warfare than having tunnels all throughout and and just popping up anywhere and attacking people. I mean, that's
Yeah.
pretty crazy.
Japanese use that strategy a lot on, the islands.
Yes.
Iwo Jima and um, the different island warfares. They would set up intricate tunnel systems and just pop up behind enemy lines or where they thought enemy lines were.
Right.
There were no real lines in a lot of these places.
Yeah.
They would, if they found one of these tunnels, they'd just pour 50 gallons of gasoline down in there and light it on fire. Because what are you going to do? You can't climb down in the tunnel looking for, waiting to be ambushed at every turn. So a lot of these things, been used for a long period of time. There's a book written by Mao Zedong about guerrilla
Yes.
warfare, and the
Yes.
idea is basically, when the enemy's stationary, you attack. When they advance, you retreat. When they retreat, you attack. You don't engage the enemy.
When they
You know
want to be
when they
engaged, right?
be engaged, right?
It's all about playing the game on your terms and
Hmm.
not their terms. And that's, I mean, honestly, a good approach in life, is to
Hmm.
play it when you can play it instead of when they're prepared and plan their big attack.
Yeah. Now, some of the things that you would use during guerrilla warfare would be different types of tactics. One of them was that was a big one during Vietnam was the sniper trap, and that's basically you hit a enemy soldier, but you only wound him and leave him stranded out there. So other people have to come out and get him,
Yes.
and then you take them out. So
Yeah.
that was used by the Japanese quite a bit. That was used during Vietnam. That was used by, a lot of militaries with smaller forces would do this. And you could pin down an entire unit for, even
Trying to
days.
rescue their one guy,
Right.
right? And, that whole no man left behind kind of thing. I don't know. And yeah, that's just a mess. And that's how do you handle something like that? That's your buddy, that's somebody you care about out there, and you're trying to do the right thing and not leave your guy, but it's certain death if you're going out there, then you got two guys laying there.
Right.
And it just is a mess. Your best move is to try and, have somebody get around and flank and get the sniper and whatever. But obviously, easier
Yeah.
said than done, right? I mean,
Right.
that's the thing. It's
Right.
not really a practical move.
Hmm. Yeah. Another big tactic of guerrilla warfare is a feigned retreat.
Mm,
Right. So um, the Mongols did this. Uh, the Greeks at Thermopylae did this. Um, at Thermopylae, now I think most people know about Thermopylae from the movie 300, which
yes.
wasn't really an historically accurate movie. It was a artistically it was a great movie, but it wasn't really that accurate. For
No, but
one,
it was fun.
yeah, it was fun, and for
Yeah.
one, the Greek soldiers, they weren't like completely naked except for helmets and shields. You know what I
Right. I
mean?
mean, if you're going to be naked, own it, right?
They had full body armor. They were all in, and they were going up against the what were they called, uh I'm blanking on their name, but the immortals, that was it. The immortals, same thing. They were heavily armored,
Yeah.
and they worked well with shield walls and phalanx that the Greeks used. And so what the Greeks did was they just backed up and backed up and backed up and got into this narrower and narrower spot, what they called the hot gates. And then the Athenians that were with them, which was a small force, a couple thousand, came down a ravine into the side of them,
Yeah.
disrupted the whole phalanx, and that was pretty much it for the immortals. They weren't, turns out
Yeah.
they weren't immortal.
They weren't immortal.
Yeah.
Yeah, it turns out now I'm gonna have to go watch 300 again. You got me all excited. I,
It was a good movie, man.
it's yeah, but like you said, as far as history, but it's kind of that all in attitude. They showcase that with they show them where they get rid of the kids that aren't gonna be
Mhm.
productive members of society, kind of
Right.
thing. They have the kind of brutality of it. But it's kind of that all in mentality, but what are you
Yeah.
all in for if you're not protecting what you have? It's
Yeah, but, that's really kind of, what happened to Spartans, it was the same, what caused them to be such great warriors was what caused the society to collapse, basically, is they didn't have enough
exactly
people, you know?
right.
If everybody's a soldier and they're always fighting, then, you're not making babies.
And it goes back to your point earlier of, it's fine if you're constantly conquering new lands and able to get new resources and supplies sent back, but
Right.
just the same, as soon as you hit a wall, things run out pretty quickly. That's the
Mhm.
if you don't have a long-term sustainable, way to do it to, keep things moving forward, keep producing products, right? I mean, that's what it comes down to is supplies. And that's another big tactic that kind of comes into play is cutting off supplies. They have
Right.
ship blockades throughout history.
Mhm.
That was the whole Lusitania thing getting sunk and like that is, anything that tries to come in and bring relief supplies, you got to shut it down. You got to keep shutting it down. Now,
Yeah.
some people would argue that the Lusitania getting sunk was maybe allowed to happen by some kind of propaganda for our government to look like, yeah, look, we need to be all in on this.
Mhm.
But just the same, it's still an example of, supply ships getting,
Yeah,
you
and,
know,
a lot
shut
of people said, "Oh, the Lusitania was just transporting passengers, it was
It's
not a
passengers
military."
and happy.
It was full
Yes, supplies.
of
Yeah.
supplies. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how warfare goes sometimes. Now
Now another tactic
yes.
of the guerrilla warfare is what we would call bounding overwatch. Um, so what we would do is basically have one group of soldiers offering suppressive fire while another group advances.
Okay.
And you basically would be doing this when you knew the enemy was nearby, but you didn't know exactly where they were. So you'd advance while one group watched, and then the group that was advancing would take up positions and overwatch while the other group advanced. And you want to
Yeah,
do it with at least two groups, but you can do it as many groups as you have soldiers, really.
right. No, I like it. That's I mean, that's it. If you can just keep moving forward, I mean, just constantly pressing the enemy and keeping them off guard is always, a great strategy, but you have to have the resources to keep pressing.
Right.
That's yeah, if you have four guys and you just keep, well, yeah, I'm going to keep moving forward. Well, you might get shot though. That's the whole.
You might be down
Um,
to two guys pretty quick.
Now, I mean, next I had asymmetrical warfare, which is kind of the opposite of guerrilla warfare. It's U.S. military. It's kind of, I mean, that was like our approach when we first went in the Gulf War was just like traditional, go in and fight like soldiers in a line and kind of roll through. And that's what obviously the British did to the early American
Hmm.
forces, when they're, when that happened. Think of the traditional British Army attack. I don't know, not my exciting thing. Again, it works when you have volume. It does create a shock and awe kind of effect of just, hey, we're rolling in like thunder. I mean, you could even be like total warfare. I mean, if you imagine how the cons were rolling into your little establishment, you have
Hmm.
a town and you're just overwhelmed by forces and everything just rolling through.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive. It
Yeah.
can definitely take you out, but you need to be the annihilating force. You can't if you don't have large numbers and tanks and whatever in the modern day, horses in yesteryear, then you're not going to win on that one. Now,
Right.
another another technique that kind of has always fascinated me, and honestly seems to be the approach in the modern day. I feel like the Middle East, a lot of the groups like Al Qaeda and ISIS and like that are applying these techniques. The Chinese are applying these techniques. Russia is applying these techniques. People say that the communists, were big on this back in the day. I would say is poisoning the well.
Hmm.
And what I mean for that is kind of destroying your enemy from within. Now, I know we talked about divide and conquer earlier on, but just weakening your enemy and anything you can do to kind of demoralize and ruin them as a society is going to kind of give you the upper hand. And that's what you kind of got, like, was the approach from China and Russia and towards. So one of the big things they always feared and they always talked about in the early 60s was that the communists had a plan to destroy our country,
Hmm.
and that we defeated kind of Russia and pushed them back. Now, obviously, we didn't really defeat Russia until 89 or whatever. You could talk about, the wall and how Gorbachev and all that. But
Yeah. And communism kind of defeated itself, really.
oh,
You know.
Kevin, yes, no, you're not wrong. And that was it. I mean, well, I don't know. I got to say Reagan had a big we can outspend them.
Yeah, and that really is what caused them to collapse, trying to keep up with the
Right.
Joneses. You know.
Capitalism versus, I mean, that's kind of a big play on capitalism versus socialism. I know you're saying, well, Chuck, you just said it's communism, and it was dictator controlled kind of thing, which
Hmm.
does fall into communism a lot more than socialism. But that idea of production, um, just kind of, but anyway, so there was a list actually read into the congressional record. It was Albert Herlong Jr., a Democrat from Florida in 1963, put together testimony that he read before Congress that he said was scholars and writings of current or former communists. They basically outlined what they felt was the communist agenda to kind of take down America,
Hmm.
and this is what they believed was going on from the writings and the papers they were getting. The guys who wear the plain shirts and the Castro cap.
Yep.
Some of you guys who are younger don't remember that, but you had the guy who was wearing the Castro cap and you knew he was
He
Commie
was.
Pinko.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So they had a bunch of ideas. Now they have a list you can actually read of what was put in of 45 goals of the Communist Party. This was in 1963. But I'm not going to read all 45 because that would be ridiculous and boring. But one of the things was provide American aid to all nations regardless of communist denomination, was like a goal they had for
Hmm.
us. Grant recognition of Red China and admit Red China to the UN. And that's kind of like right on the cusp kind of now. That's kind of a thing.
Hmm.
Um Promote the UN as the only hope for mankind, cuz that's the thing, you need to make it bigger than America, right? We had to
Right.
get away from America as the thing. Um They had another one. I had a lot. I don't know why I'm flipping papers. Capture one or both of the political parties in the US. Now, a lot of people would make an argument that maybe one of the parties was kind of captured for, and I could even make an argument that maybe both of the political parties were kind of
Hmm.
captured
Well,
by
I
that.
mean, how many people on the right and left are getting nonsense about Russian interference about
Right.
with
About the
elections
other. Right.
and this and that, and everybody's concerned about it. A lot of Russian propaganda focuses on transsexuals. For
Yeah.
some
Well,
reason, there's an
that's in
obsession with
here. That's in here.
yeah.
They yeah, they but that's it. The political parties. The thing is, it's not hard to convince a politician that, hey, wouldn't you like to be in charge of more shit? And the
Right.
guy's like, well, it
Yeah.
turns out I do know better than everybody else, and it would be better
Hmm.
if I ran it. So that's not hard to do. Another one of their list in 1963 was get control of the schools, use them as transmission belts for socialism and current communist propaganda.
Hmm.
Soften the curriculum, get control of teachers' associations, and put the party line in textbooks. And I feel like that may have been done over the years. And honestly, more so in the 70s and 80s, it was starting to like creep in and really do it. Another goal they had was infiltrate the press. Now, you never thought that of our press as having communist leanings, but it's possible that they might be slowly working in there, Kevin.
Hmm.
I'm just saying that's a thing. Um, break down cultural standards of morality by promoting pornography, obscenity in books, magazines, motion pictures, radio, and TV. Present homosexuality, degeneracy, and promiscuity as normal and healthy behavior.
Hmm.
And the thing is that no matter how you want to take it, at the time, these were all shocking and offensive to the American culture in
Right.
1963. Everyone was like, whoa, that's not normal. No, it's possible we've been conditioned and influenced to accept these things as well. That's not a bad thing. I don't see, you know.
Yeah, I mean, pornography and vulgarity in movies. I mean, those are my favorite movies.
Ex-
You know,
Who
those are the
doesn't
best
like
ones.
Boogie Nights, Kevin?
You know what I'm saying?
Right? Are you kidding me? Eliminate prayer or any phase of religious expression in the schools on the grounds that it violates the principle of separation of church and state.
Hmm.
Um, discredit the American Constitution by calling it inadequate, old fashioned, out of step with modern needs, a hindrance to cooperation between nations on a worldwide basis. I gotta say that was kind of Obama's whole agenda was how many
He had a
times did
big
you hear him go
privilege.
out and say that the Constitution was an antiquated document?
Yeah,
I
and he
you
said
heard
it
that
was
over and over.
it was a flawed document because it didn't provide for the redistribution of wealth,
Right.
which is oh, to me that's a crazy thing to say.
That is crazy thing to say, Kevin. Belittle all forms of American culture and discourage the teaching of American history on the ground that it was a minor part of the big picture. And we really have lately shifted into the world, and I
Hmm.
say lately, like last 15 years, 20 years. Um, discredit, and you're gonna like this one because this is like a Trump thing. Discredit and eventually dismantle the FBI. That's kind of coming into play there.
Yeah,
Um,
the FBI was a big at this time period, the FBI was like big push, big anti-communist push. I don't know if you remember McCarthyism and reading your history on that sort of stuff. But he basically just came up with a blank piece of paper and said, "I have on this
I have
paper
a
a
list.
list of
All the
communists in
commies.
our government." And he
Yeah.
had no list; it was all just made up. And then they finally started getting pushback, and he's like, "I have another list of paper of all the communists in the military."
Yep.
And
Yep.
Eisenhower was president at the time, and that was kind of at the point where Eisenhower was like, "Nah, dude,
We've gone too
you
far.
got to shut this shit down."
You flew
And
too close to the sun.
yeah, and McCarthy kind of did it to himself because he was an alcoholic and just kind of drank himself to death.
Yeah. Nah,
That
I
happens.
mean, the whole thing is America should be an open debate of ideas.
Hmm.
And I'm okay with people bringing up ideas. We just need an informed and intelligent society who can debate these ideas. And that's where I do think we need to be guarded with our education system. And not by not teaching communist things or whatever, but by teaching people how to think. And as long as people know how to think for themselves and weigh and value ideas, then I think that we have a future. One of the last ones I wanted to hit on was discredit the family as an institution and promote promiscuity and the ease of divorce.
Mm.
Feel
Yep.
like definitely a change. And my point is not that all these things are blatantly, inherently evil on their own, but they were all shocking in 1963 to Americans. And it is amazing how much the mind has shifted. And the communists, or sorry, and the Chinese are very big on changing American culture and subtly, shifting things to ease into their ideas and ways of life. Although I have to say, not so much lately you don't hear about it, but you go back 10 years ago maybe, capitalism was really influencing Chinese culture. And by that I mean like business and stuff. They were actually starting to have where the Communist Party of China was letting companies kind of run independently and do their thing. And they were starting to really ease off control, and it was starting to do really well for China.
Hmm.
I don't know how much that's followed through in the recent years. They've had so much craziness going on with their construction and building loans and scandals with that, where we end up funding everybody. That is amazing to me. The US government just giving money to all these people to, bribe warlords and whatever else in the Middle East and different things like that, and trying to stomp everything. It kind of doesn't end well. Um we end up funding our enemies. And I feel
Hmm.
like that's definitely a tactic that really has hurt the American cause. Um, I don't know. That's what I got on warfare, Kevin.
Yeah, yeah. No, a lot of this stuff I think can be applied to your personal life. How you deal with things day to day. One of the things that you had mentioned on that just wanted to touch on was adultery and divorce, normalizing that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
You know, I personally, and I've taken this advice and used it multiple times. But if you know somebody that cheats on their wife and you deal with them, you have to understand that this is somebody that lied to somebody, that made all these promises to, in
And
front of
this
all their friends and
right,
family, in front of God. They're not going to have any problem lying to you.
right.
You know what I mean?
This
They
is
have
my
no.
favorite partner in the world that I chose and made a big commitment to be my business partner in life,
Hmm.
and then you're betraying them.
Right.
So that's yeah, that's something pretty shady. That's one of the things I always heard. Glenn Beck gave a speech one time, and he was talking about, he's a Mormon or whatever, and people don't like Mormons, and oh my God, and whatever.
Hmm.
And was he was like, look, even if I'm completely wrong and there's no God and I misread this, I love what my family is so much more with this than what my family is without it.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Like, by living by a moral code of truth and honesty, it just feels better. And your family of, obviously nobody's perfect. Nobody has, oh, I've never lied. I've never, whatever. That's not my point. My point is working towards that goal. You have so much a better family core, and it's just nicer. It's a better world to live in when we all trust each other and are honest. That's all I'm saying.
Right.
Now, I know me and Kevin can maybe be honest to a fault because maybe, I've always heard people say, what? The next time you have a thought, maybe you should have just let it go
Hmm.
instead of saying it. Maybe we don't need to say it every time, but you know how it is. Sometimes, you got to say it, and that's it. But hopefully, a little more prepared out of this, a little more like understanding maybe how you're being manipulated, how to approach the world and how things might shape up, and maybe a better understanding of what might be coming in the future. So, with that, Kevin, anything else? We're
That's
there.
it.
All right. So, questions, concerns, show ideas, email us at preppingbadass@gmail.com. Otherwise, I would say stay safe, and we will talk to you guys next week.